Hi, everybody. Thanks for the amazing effort in week one, and we're jumping into week two. So I appreciate all that you do. If anybody has any issues with books or anything like that, please feel free to contact me. I'm easy to get a hold of, 760-912-9242, or you can email me. Either one, I get back very quickly. So just appreciate everybody getting to know each other in the week one flip grid and then all the responses. So let's go ahead and jump into week two. And I want to start week two with a question. And my question is, have you ever taught content? Now, from my perspective, the answer to that would be no, because you can't teach content. Content doesn't absorb anything. You can't teach anything to the content. The content already knows everything. We teach people. People learn content. So we always have to keep people at the forefront. How will they absorb? How will they experience the content that we're giving them? Will they experience through active training methods, or will it be a passive experience? So remember, you've never taught content because content can't be taught. It's inanimate. So but we do teach people. We teach learners all the time. So we teach learners, and learners learn content. So that's kind of the perspective I want to approach this from. And as we think about that, how do we know what needs to be trained? That's the biggest thing, because you can have the greatest tools in the world, but if they don't fit the need, guess what? It's no good. So what we're going to look at is we're going to make sure the training first is focused on organizational needs, because remember, the organization is made up of people, and the people within the organization are going forward towards the same goal. So always look at goals, mission, vision, values, whatever the organization is. And if they're clearly dictated, it makes our job a little bit simpler to frame training quite often. So that's a good place to start. Then all needs analysis is gathering data. So who do we gather the data from? Where do we gather the data? It could be from people, SMEs. It could be from documentation. There's all kinds of different ways that we can gather data, and be practical about it. So if we're teaching people, training people, we want to make sure that we're practical so they can use it. We don't want to have some esoteric training program that doesn't do them any good, doesn't give them skills that they need. So we want to be able to focus on the mission, vision, values of the organization, gather the data, and then we want to be practical with everything that we're going to do with our training. And talk. This was an acronym that we used to use all the time, because the government, whenever you're going for a government contract, there's an option that the government has, and that is talk. And that's called technically acceptable lowest cost. So sometimes when you're doing your needs analysis, you want to think from that perspective. Now, technically acceptable lowest cost. So what are some of the concerns about the organization? That's why we need to look at the organization needs, mission, vision, values, goals first, because we can come up with a great training plan, but if it's too expensive, guess what? It's not going to work. One time I was working on, we were doing a special operation C-130, and for some reason it was flying crooked. At least that's what the crew was saying, and there were a few of them that were doing this. So we were in a competition with another company, and we came up with just an awesome solution. It was high tech, it was hands off, it was just the latest and greatest, and it was absolutely awesome. And our competitor basically came up with a string with a washer on it that would sway if the airplane wasn't going the right direction. It wasn't that untechnical, but you can see the difference. So, and guess which one the customer wanted, because the string with the washer was technically acceptable, and it was a much lower cost than what we wanted. So that was shame on us, because we didn't really listen to what the organization, in this case the U.S. Air Force, wanted. We came up with just a fantastic solution that we thought was the absolute best, but we weren't paying attention. So that's why it's always important to think, for me, to think about talk, technically acceptable lowest cost. Because when we're talking about performance, we want to make sure that that performance matches what the organization needs. So that's a big deal. And one way that we do this is working with SMEs. And SMEs are just a fantastic wealth of knowledge. And a couple things. If you go in, like I worked in the manufacturing area, so I'd work with SMEs who had varying years of experience. What I like to do for when we were putting together a training plan, a training program, is to have somebody, an expert with minimal experience, then look towards your journeyman and then your master mechanic type folks. So you want a novice, middle of the road, and then complete expert, because they all have different experiences. And the greatest question I ever asked was, how would you like to have learned this? Because oftentimes, when we're just trying to get data from them, from the SMEs and things like that, they're fantastic at providing that, but they want to be more engaged into the whole process. And when I started asking that question, the training I designed started becoming a whole lot better, because it took in all their perspective, because they went through this stuff. I went through training and an apprenticeship program. But you know what? My experience was different than everybody else's, because each person has their own set of experiences. So when we start to be able to gather that, we win. We win big. And one thing that started happening when I started asking that question, and I got flooded with some outstanding answers, is when the training program was set, it was their program. It wasn't the program that George made or that the Learning and Development Department made. It was my program, is what the SMEs would say, my training class. So what that did, that built us in success. So folks coming from the training plan would use the behaviors they were taught in the training class, or the folks, the SMEs, which were lucky enough to have a large group all the time, would then adjust the behaviors of the people coming back from training if they were not following the procedures they were taught, because there was automatic buy-in, because it was their class. It wasn't learning and development's class, it was their class. So that's a big deal. And value their input, because I've seen people work with SMEs who don't value their input. I don't know why you wouldn't, but some people kind of think of in terms of hierarchies, where you're talking with people who have extreme experience and skills in whatever they do. So value that experience, because it matters, because people don't become a master mechanic or start their process of becoming a journeyman mechanic or anything else when they simply can't do the job. So value their input, no matter, even if it's management, leadership training, whatever it may be. Whoever your SMEs are, value their input and ask those great questions. So if you have any questions that are fantastic, I would love to hear them, because I'm always looking at ways to become better and get even better information from our SMEs. And now, how do they know, or how do we know they know? So let's talk about evaluation. Evaluation is critical, and think beyond a typical test. So as you're building your training program, are we going to use formative evaluation, summative evaluation? So formative is going through the program. Are we going to use evaluations to adjust how we approach the training, or are we just going to have a test at the end? And when I say test, think beyond the typical test. Think about what would be the most meaningful thing for the learner. What would be the most meaningful way for them to show that they know, show us what they know? So keep that in mind as well. We're going to dig deeper into evaluation, but I just want to kind of start putting that out there, because that's going to be a part of our training assignment. And what will you use to measure success with? So we've put together this great training program. We've talked with all the SMEs, we've gathered all the data, and we're starting to put down what they know. So I like to think of WIFT, what's in it for them. And so focus back on the mission, vision, values, goals of the organization. When you focus back on those mission, vision, values of the organization, guess what? You automatically have that measure built in if they are measuring something. So for instance, if it is turnover rates for employees, and that's what your training is supposed to address, they're probably keeping a metric on that or some sort of measure, so you can attach your training to that measure. So if it's defect rate, something that's being built, you can attach the success of your training to that defect rate. So things like that. So that forces us to make sure that training is practical, because make sure that it meets the needs of the organization and the learner as well.